Anger over an anti-Islam video spreads through the Middle East and beyond. It's the first major test for new leaders of the Arab Spring. So what road will they take? Appeasement of hardliners or condemnation of the violence? And what of their relations with the US? This is Inside Story. Hello there, welcome to the programme. I'm Shuli Ghosh. It's a defining moment for the new leaders of the Middle East. Attacks and demonstrations are spreading across the region as anger grows over a video made in the US, which is said to be highly insulting to the Prophet Muhammad. Following the killing of the American ambassador in Libya, US missions across the Muslim world are on high alert. In Egypt, protesters have clashed with police in Cairo. A nationwide march was called by the Muslim Brotherhood, the group which propelled President Mohammed Morsi into power. There have been similar demonstrations in Tunisia, Gaza, Sudan, Yemen, and they're spreading. In Sana'a, hundreds of Yemenis tried to break into the US embassy on Friday and were shot at by security forces. How they deal with these protests, how they navigate both international demands and domestic politics, is undoubtedly a major test for the region's newest leaders. In Libya, the government immediately apologised. There's been an investigation and arrests have been made. The group said to be responsible, Ansar al-Sharia, has been dismantled. In Egypt, Mohammed Morsi has been slower to respond. He rebuked the demonstrators on Facebook, but he didn't condemn the killing of the US ambassador in Libya until he received a phone call from President Barack Obama. In Tunisia, though the interim government voiced their condemnation of the video, state media have downplayed the story. So how will so-called Arab Spring governments handle the ongoing public anger? For more on this, I'm joined by our guests today. From Cairo, Sherif El Haggan, political analyst and a professor at American University of Cairo. From Beirut, Joseph Kechichian, independent Middle East analyst and a columnist for Gulf News. And from Washington, D.C., Kurt Werthmuller, research fellow at the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. Gentlemen, welcome to the programme. I mean, this is clearly a real test for those leaders who came to power off the back of protests. Kurt, let me come to you. The problem for them is they have to show statesmanship, but they also feel that they have to react to the video.
Yes, and this seems to have been this great difficulty for President Morsi in Egypt, of course, to react in that sort of a way. I suspect that part of the reason there was such a delay in any kind of response is that was exactly the question that Morsi was trying to figure out. In one hand, I can imagine that he was just as incensed as many of the protesters, was certainly along with the rest of his, we can say,
well, I mean, that will have been his default position,
yeah,
won't it have been, to vent his anger at the video and its anti-Islamic message as it's been seen?
Certainly. That would have been his default position, and his earliest statements were had the onus of the discussion on, of course, the video rather than putting his statesman face forward and saying, let's calm down, let's get out of the streets, let's have a rational discussion about this. That took a very long time to come, and even then it was a rather tepid response.
Yeah, real reminder that in this region politics and religion are interchangeable.
Yes, certainly.
Sherif, let's come to you. So we've said that Egypt's new president has been slow to respond. What do you think is going through his head right now?
Yeah, in my opinion, taking the unstable situation in Egypt now, it's not that stable, still ripe. I think Morsi responded in a balanced manner, not maybe as strong as the Americans and the West would expect, and also not as strong as the hardliners would expect. So this is politically a balanced way of responding to what happened.
Do you think it's... Sorry to interrupt. Do you think it's significant that the Muslim Brotherhood, which called for this nationwide march in Egypt, then backed away from that position? And in fact, the Muslim Brotherhood's leader has now come out and said, actually, the US is not responsible for this video. Is that significant?
I fully agree that the US government, I'm not saying the person who did it or the group who did it are responsible, obviously, for their own deeds. But the US cannot be responsible. The problem is that with some of the young people in Tahrir Square who are demonstrating, they have lived in a dictatorship for 60 years, and they think that the president of USA can phone somebody and say, stop that or don't do that. So they don't understand that the president cannot interfere with this, and that what's happening now is a matter of opinion to which we respond with opinions. And I'm taking this opportunity to give my deep condolences, first as a Muslim and as an Egyptian, to all who were terrorized in the US embassy in Egypt, and of course to the families of the people who were killed in Libya. And that is a totally unacceptable, from the Islamic point of view, unacceptable deed. I totally am against it, yes.
Joseph, let me bring you in here, because Sherif is saying that Mohammed Morsi gave as balanced a response as he could do under the circumstances. The problem is his decisions now and what he does in the future, not just him, but other Arab Spring leaders, are under international scrutiny.
Well, it's a very complicated issue, obviously. As someone who just recently watched this video, I am too appalled by its contents. But President Morsi of Egypt really is the big loser in this particular episode, because he has demonstrated that he has no command on the street. Obviously, he's a president who has been in power for a very short period of time, and his election was very much a divided ballot, if you would like, with barely 50% of the population voting for him, with millions of young people still out of jobs, very emotional crowds that can easily degenerate into the catastrophe that we have seen. And the fact that President Obama essentially uttered words that were very, very serious, in my humble opinion, when he essentially said that Egypt is not an ally, but is not an enemy either. This to me is a diplomatic slap on the face. And it seems to me that the Muslim Brotherhood that has called off the million-person march has turned out to be much smarter than Morsi, trying to anticipate the kind of reaction that Washington rightfully will take now in trying to redirect the direction of the foreign policy with Egypt. So therefore, I think that Morsi is a big loser in this particular episode.
So who are the winners? Who are benefiting? I mean, the people are saying that the Salafists and the ultra-conservatives, for example, are benefiting from all of this.
No, I think the confused are benefiting for it. I mean, all of those individuals who are essentially in the streets trying to vent their frustrations because allegedly in the video the Prophet Muhammad was really, I cannot find words to describe how silly this movie is, or the clip that I have seen, which is only 13 minutes long. Obviously, it's insulting. There is no doubt about that.
But Joseph, nobody would have known about this video, to be honest, unless there hadn't been such a huge hoo-ha over it. I mean, it would have languished in obscurity.
Precisely, that's my point. I mean, this is such not even a B movie. It doesn't even qualify to a C movie, if there is a movie out there. But the 13 minutes online is a terrible video. This is not even worth watching. But obviously people are emotional about this and they take it seriously. And it seems to me that the real winners in this entire episode are those individuals who like to manipulate masses, who like to further divide the East from the West, the Christian world with the Muslim world. And this is really not conducive to peaceful relationships.
The other gentleman on our panel, do you agree with that, Kurt? Do you think that this is being exploited by those groups who want to undermine and destabilize?
Well, certainly it's being exploited, and it will continue to be exploited. You know, although it does seem that some of the groups that were part of the original protests on Tuesday, such as the Noor Party in Egypt, seem to have been a bit taken aback by how much things got out of hand, and yet they were part of the initial protests. Those protests seem to have been initially called before even word of this video was getting around. But one thing that is important to note is we do need to keep a street level view in terms of the protests and in terms of what's motivating people. And one of the other guests noted earlier that obviously the way that people are perceiving this tremendously spiteful and ridiculous film really motivates people on the ground. And it's important to understand that there are rumors floating around the crowds who have been gathering and have been protesting, saying, for example, that this film has been broadcast on American TV, which is so far from reality that it's ludicrous, and yet people act according to their perceptions, and that's exactly what's happened here. That it is correct that there's a disconnect in the Cairo street or other streets in terms of what free speech means in the United States, and in terms of that complete disconnect between what individual American citizens do and what the government
That is an interesting point, actually.
does.
Sherif, let me ask you that, because Kurt brings up the important point. Is there going to have to be a reassessment among these new governments, the so-called Arab Spring governments, as to freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, the things that they allegedly campaigned for when they were protesting for power?
I'd like to just stress that we must put this matter into perspective. Look at the number of demonstrators. It's very few. We're making a very big issue out of really almost nothing, practically. And if you divide these three demonstrators,
you say they're very few, but these protests are spreading right across the Middle East and across North Africa. Not only US embassies now being targeted, but we've got German embassy being targeted, the British embassy being targeted. In fact, people are saying that this is spreading into a general anti-West thing as opposed to just an anti-US thing.
By a few people who understand the democracy and the role of the very few people in America who did that, did not demonstrate. Very few people. And if you divide this into three categories, you'll find that the number of real protesters is very few, very small. If you remember the caricatures in the Danish magazine a few years ago, the reactions were much bigger than that. And that was under dictatorship. So I think gradually people will understand that there is few people who want to destabilize the relationship between the East and West, and will respond to that. Actually, the response
But you're not saying these protests are
good.
insignificant, are you?
Sorry?
You're not saying these protests are insignificant.
Of course, the killing of people in Libya is very significant, but the number of people involved are very few.
Joseph, do you agree with that?
No, I'm afraid I don't. I think that this is much more serious than people give it credit for. And it seems to me that with the Danish cartoon example that our colleague from Cairo has just mentioned, we did not have attacks on diplomatic posts. We did not have the assassination, really, of 4 American diplomats in Benghazi. We did not have the storming of diplomatic posts in Yemen and elsewhere. This is serious. I don't think that people should really underestimate the clash that exists right now. It reminds me of Huntington's very famous clash of civilizations argument that was made 20 years ago, and now it seems that we're living it, where we have a clash between religions, really, because the gist of this upsetting environment is what? Is the fact that a lot of people assume that the United States of America is anti-Muslim, and that this movie, this clip, I should say, is evidence of that, whereas nothing can be further from the truth, because this has nothing to do with the United States of America. It has to do with one deranged individual who has so much rancor in his heart that he is attacking the entire Muslim world, and that's really serious, and that should be taken very seriously by Muslim leaders.
Okay, Joseph, hold that thought. Let's look at how the US is reacting. The US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton distanced her government from the video. Here's what she had to say.
To us, to me personally, this video is disgusting and reprehensible. It appears to have a deeply cynical purpose to denigrate a great religion and to provoke rage. Let me state very clearly, and I hope it is obvious, that the United States government had absolutely nothing to do with this video. We absolutely reject its content and message.
Kurt, do you think the US has reacted in the right way?
I think Clinton's response was, for the most part, a good response there in Morocco. She did right to separate the United States government from individuals. She did right to say that the film was a horrible thing, as everyone should. The only thing that I would have liked to have heard more strongly is a greater emphasis on the fact that free speech is, an essential part of the U.S. Constitution, and
yeah,
not to
hard
backtrack,
to say
but
that,
there is one
without
important.
Sounding as though you're defending the contents of this video.
Yeah, well, it's a delicate dance to do that, but I think it's an important dance to do because it's that constitutional issue that, frankly, needs to be understood by I hate to use this expression, but the other side, that it is an integral part of not just American politics, but American ideology and identity. Is
but can the U.S. do more? I mean, a lot of critics are saying, why isn't the U.S. doing more about the people who made this video? Surely it's incitement for religious hatred or some such.
Well, here's the distinction in terms of American law, and I don't pretend to be a constitutional expert or a legal expert, but there is a line to be drawn between something that is inciting people to violence or something that's merely insulting or offensive. And the U.S. Constitution protects free speech. People can say things even if they're unbelievably insulting, like this trailer or film, if it exists, really was. But for something to be considered illegal, it has to be something that directly incites people. In other words, if this film had said, "Look how bad Islam is," and people, you should go do something about it, you should go harm Muslims or something like that, then it would have been incitement, and that would have been a different matter. But insulting someone else's beliefs, it's regrettable, but it's legal under the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, Sherif, a lot of people won't want to hear that. Also, we've got the added angle that an Egyptian Coptic Christian is said to be involved in this film. Is that going to cause further religious tension, do you think?
Nothing is happening against the Coptics here. And remember that we as Muslims believe in Jesus Christ and his mother Mary, peace be upon them. We cannot attack them, for example. We cannot respond by attacking them. Christians have lived here for 1,500 years.
Well, I mean, Coptic Christians have been attacked in Egypt, haven't they? I mean, there has been religious tension in Egypt between the Coptic Christians.
Do you mean because of this movie? Because of this movie or previously?
For other factors in the past, and now I am asking whether this will lead to more tension in the future.
I don't think so. I think that Egypt will be stabilizing gradually. The government now and Dr. Morsi are in a corner because they will be attacked whatever they say. If they are balanced, they will be attacked. If they take a hard line this way or the other way, they will be accused of being against the Prophet Muhammad or enemies of the USA. And they are neither. Yeah. So I think that the matter is balanced here. And I still insist, despite what my colleague said, that the incident is, the demonstrators are very few and very few are serious. Remember, some of these are counter-revolutionaries, anti-revolution, who have been certainly pushed by others to destabilize Egypt. But still, the incident is very small. Look at the TV on the screen, on Al Jazeera itself. I'm not talking about more than 400 or 500 people.
Joseph, sorry to interrupt you, Sherif. I want to get Joseph to answer one of the points that you made, which is a good point. Whatever President Morsi does, he will be attacked because he has so many competing pressures and he's a new leader. He's got to find his way.
That's right. I think that President Morsi is in front of a dilemma at this point. On the one hand, he's going to go to the United States first on an official visit where he will be taken to the woodshed because of this terrible incident and his reaction to it. On the other hand, the United States perhaps may have done things slightly differently. I would have added to Secretary Clinton's speech that not only this movie or this clip does not represent the government of the United States, but that it doesn't represent the United States, period. But President Morsi will also have to address very seriously his indigenous problems. He has revolutionaries on his hands, counter-revolutionaries, and his crisis is not going to go away. In fact, it is going to bring back to the surface some of the underlying causes that he has not been or he doesn't have time yet. He hasn't had time to resolve them. All of these are going to boil to the surface, and he will face serious dilemmas.
Kurt, I saw you nodding there in agreement. I guess the question is, ultimately, what kind of government these new leaders are trying to create? I mean, what will it mean to be a Libyan, an Egyptian, a Tunisian? Because they're struggling to find an identity, aren't they?
They certainly are. And, you know, I think this question of free speech is one that's going to be a real watershed one in terms of to the extent to which these Islamist parties that have come to the forefront of new politics in the region, the limitations of democracy, and I don't mean that in terms of process, I mean that in terms of thought. You know, if we think of democracy as more than just a ballot box, more than just an electoral politics, but also based on a framework of real citizenship that gives dignity to individual conscience, well, I think right now we're seeing a real limitation in terms of that particular issue within that broader democratic framework, and that is cause for concern. If I may, I'd like to go back to one other earlier point in terms of the potential backlash for Copts in Egypt. There is an important point to be made. The individual who appears to have made this film in Southern California, I think it should be emphasized that he is a Copt, but he's a con man. He's a convicted criminal. All signs point to the fact that he appears to have conned an entire cast and crew into making this film. He really is a con man.
Yeah, and as you say, we don't even know if it is a film. All we've seen is this short clip, and various people involved with it are saying that's not what they were told this was going to be about.
Yes, that's exactly right. And unfortunately, again, we come back to perception, and I'm not concerned about the average Egyptian, as my colleague Sherif pointed out earlier. For the average Egyptian in the street, they're not going to be going out and doing something to Copts. But there is an element within the protests. We see that on placards, we see that on signs, even new ones coming out today, that are very concerning in regard to making a connection between this, ex-con from a Coptic background and Copts in Egypt, and not from the average Egyptian, but from radical elements. There is the potential for there to be backlash, localized violent backlash against Coptic individuals and property, and that is of concern.
Joseph, as Sherif has said, there is always going to be groups who try and capitalise on this kind of protest, on this kind of trouble, and will try to undermine, destabilise the government. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. I think that this is obviously an effort to destabilize the Morsi government as much as possible. It's also true in Libya as well. We still don't know what happened in Benghazi and who was behind the attack on the ambassador and his staff. So it could be orchestrated. Obviously, there are movements throughout the Arab world that are now reacting to the revolutions that we've been living during the past 2 years, and they're not happy with the many changes that are taking place. Who are these individuals? Who is backing them? We don't know. Whether it's indigenous or whether it's supported by outside forces, we really don't know at this stage.
Okay.
However,
sorry to interrupt, Joseph. We're running out of time. I just wanted to give the last thought to our guest who's in Cairo. Sherif, you heard what Joseph was saying there. This could be used to exploit an underlying problem in Egypt, trying to destabilise Morsi's government. How do you think it's going to play out in Egypt?
I think that the effect of these demonstrations will be minor. I have seen very few on TV live yesterday on Al Jazeera and other channels. Very few people pushing the Muslim Brotherhood and Morsi. Where is Morsi? Where is the Muslim Brotherhood? Everybody in the world saw that. They're trying to involve the wise Muslim Brotherhood. And I read today that the Muslim Brotherhood have coordinated with the Salafists in order to cool things down and put matters into perspective. I think with time, with Morsi proving that he is a real leader of the Egyptians and hopefully the Arab world as well, things will get better.
Okay.
And the Copts all the Copts in Egypt have opposed, by the way, to this movie. We must take this into consideration. All
Sherif,
the Coptic factions.
We're going to have to leave it there. We've had lots of conflicting opinions. It's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you to all my guests today. From Cairo, Sherif El Haggan. From Beirut, Joseph Kechichian. And from Washington, D.C., Kurt Werthmuller.
Thank you.
And thanks to you at home for watching. If you want to share your thoughts about today's subject, do email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. But from me and the rest of the team, bye-bye for now.